England's darkest siege wasn't remembered for heroics or strategic brilliance. It became infamous for brutality and unimaginable suffering. This was Rouen, the jewel of Normandy, and its siege marked one of medieval Europe's most harrowing chapters. But what made the siege of Rouen so horrifying? How did it become synonymous with medieval cruelty? And why was capturing Rouen so vital to Henry V's ambitions in France? In this episode, we'll take you deep into the heart of the siege, exploring the brutal realities of medieval warfare from the perspective of both the relentless attackers and the desperate defenders trapped within Rouen's walls. We'll uncover the devastating strategies Henry V employed, the desperate tactics used by the city's defenders, and the shocking human cost endured by thousands of innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The siege wasn't simply a military operation. It became a moral catastrophe, pushing the boundaries of human endurance and morality. Prepare yourself for a story filled with heroism, cruelty, resilience, and tragedy. Join us as we reveal the true story behind England's darkest siege, a moment that reshaped medieval Europe forever. The decision to lay siege to Rouen wasn't accidental. It was strategic, deliberate, and ruthlessly calculated by King Henry V. By 1418, Rouen had become the gateway to French resistance in Normandy. Controlling it meant controlling the entire region. For Henry, capturing this city was essential to his grand ambition of uniting England and France under one crown. Rouen was no ordinary medieval city. It was heavily fortified, protected by massive stone walls, deep moats, formidable towers, and well-stocked provisions. It housed thousands of determined defenders and civilians who were ready to withstand a prolonged siege, believing they could outlast Henry's forces. Inside Rouen, preparations had begun months before the English arrival. Food was carefully rationed, wells were secured to prevent contamination, and defenses were strengthened daily. The city's commander, Guy le Bouteiller, organized his soldiers, determined to resist Henry's relentless ambitions. Outside the walls, Henry meticulously planned his siege. Understanding Rouen's formidable defenses, he brought a massive army equipped with siege engines, cannons, and thousands of skilled archers. Henry also ordered the construction of extensive earthworks and barricades, encircling Rouen to ensure complete isolation. Both sides knew what was at stake. Victory or defeat here would decide the future of Normandy and potentially the outcome of the war itself. Rouen represented a strategic value and symbolic power. A victory here could shatter French morale and establish English dominance. Henry issued a chilling ultimatum to Rouen's defenders: surrender or face total annihilation. Inside the city, defiance burned fiercely, for neither side expected an easy victory, but few anticipated the siege would become one of medieval Europe's longest and most horrific. As English troops took positions and siege engines began their relentless assault preparations, the citizens of Rouen braced themselves for the worst. Soldiers and civilians alike readied themselves emotionally and physically for what they believed might be weeks or even months of hardship. Yet none could have foreseen the nightmare that awaited, an ordeal so intense it would leave Rouen's streets filled with desperation and suffering, becoming a grim symbol of the brutal realities of siege warfare. What horrors would unfold once the siege truly began? To understand, we must step inside the walls of Rouen and witness firsthand the brutal cost of medieval warfare. In July 1418, the siege of Rouen officially began, and the full might of Henry V's army descended upon the city. It quickly became clear this siege wouldn't just test military strategy, it would test human endurance itself. Henry wasted no time in tightening the noose around Rouen. His troops constructed extensive siege works, cutting off every route in or out, isolating the city completely. Cannons and trebuchets bombarded Rouen's walls continuously, shaking the city and weakening defenses day after day. Inside Rouen, the defenders and civilians endured unimaginable stress. The constant bombardment damaged homes, destroyed key defenses, and took a heavy psychological toll. Sleep became impossible amidst the thunder of cannon fire and the relentless crash of stones against walls. But Rouen's citizens and defenders initially stood defiant. Soldiers courageously repaired damaged walls under constant fire, braving the threat of death to keep the city secure. They launched daring raids against English siege positions, disrupting supply lines and attempting to break the encirclement. Yet as weeks turned into months, Conditions inside Rouen deteriorated drastically. Food rations rapidly dwindled, forcing citizens and soldiers alike into extreme measures. Soon, hunger became their fiercest enemy, testing their resolve even more than Henry's relentless bombardment. Outside the walls, Henry's troops faced their own struggles. Maintaining a prolonged siege drained resources and morale. Soldiers endured harsh weather, exhaustion, disease, and occasional attacks from French relief forces attempting to break their lines. Discipline became vital, and Henry's leadership remained ruthlessly decisive. Any sign of weakness or failure was swiftly punished. Inside Rouen, desperation led to difficult decisions. City leaders faced impossible choices: how to distribute dwindling food supplies, whether to expel civilians to conserve resources, and how to keep morale from collapsing entirely. The siege became a test of military strength and a horrifying endurance battle against starvation, disease, and despair. As winter approached, suffering inside Rouen intensified dramatically. The city's food supplies vanished entirely, and thousands of starving civilians begged daily for surrender, while others held fast, refusing to yield to the English invaders. Disease spread quickly, claiming more lives than combat ever could. In one of the siege's darkest episodes, civilians were expelled from the city to conserve remaining supplies. But Henry's troops, equally determined to break Rouen's spirit, refused them safe passage. These innocent civilians were trapped between the city walls and English barricades, forced to endure freezing temperatures and starvation, their plight becoming a tragic symbol of siege warfare's brutal cruelty. Yet despite unimaginable suffering, Rouen's defenders refused to surrender easily. Each day brought renewed struggles, each night filled with desperate prayers for deliverance or relief. Inside the walls, hope faded, but resilience remained strong. But how long could such desperate resilience hold? How far would both sides go in pursuit of victory? To answer this, we must confront the darkest aspects of medieval warfare head-on, where desperation bred cruelty and survival pushed humanity to its very limits. As the siege stretched into the bitter winter of 1418, the conditions inside Rouen spiraled into unimaginable horror, showcasing the ruthless brutality of medieval warfare at its worst. With food supplies exhausted, starvation became rampant. People resorted to eating anything they could find. Rats, dogs, horses, even leather shoes boiled into a thin, barely edible broth. Starvation weakened soldiers, demoralized civilians, and made disease outbreaks even deadlier. Streets filled with the sick and dying, a grim testament to the siege's merciless toll. Disease quickly ravaged the population, spreading through cramped homes and shelters. Without food or proper medical care, plague, dysentery, and typhoid claimed more lives daily than enemy weapons ever could. The dead piled up in the streets, with no time or strength to give them proper burials. Further compounding the health crisis, desperation drove citizens to horrific extremes. Reports emerged of cannibalism, a shocking taboo that underscored the dire hopelessness within the city. Families faced impossible choices, trapped between the unbearable hunger within Rouen and the unyielding brutality outside its walls. Henry's siege tactics remained relentlessly cruel. He deliberately intensified the suffering by preventing civilians from fleeing or receiving aid. He saw civilian suffering as a weapon, calculating that the city's misery would break its defenders' morale faster than any assault could. The expelled civilians trapped between Rouen's walls and Henry's barricades became symbols of medieval cruelty. Denied entry back into the city and blocked from escaping, they died in plain view of both armies. Their plight highlighted how siege warfare often blurred moral lines, turning desperate struggles for power into profound human tragedies. Inside Rouen, defenders reached their breaking point. Soldiers weakened by hunger and disease could barely hold their weapons or mount effective resistance. Civilian morale plummeted, with despair replacing defiance as families watched loved ones succumb daily to starvation and illness. Yet, amid such horror, extraordinary acts of bravery and humanity emerged. Priests and nuns risked their lives to care for the sick and dying. Families shared what little food they had, helping neighbors survive one more day. Even in despair, compassion and solidarity flickered through the darkness. Meanwhile, English soldiers faced their own internal battles. Many questioned Henry's extreme measures, grappling with the moral weight of their actions. Yet discipline and loyalty prevented outright dissent, forcing them to endure the siege's ethical and emotional burdens alongside the physical hardships. By December, Rouen's resilience had nearly shattered. The once proud city, famed for its beauty and strength, was reduced to a place of death and despair. Its streets echoed, not with defiant battle cries, but with the cries of the desperate, the dying, and the hopeless. But what finally pushed Rouen over the edge into surrender? What price did both sides ultimately pay for this horrific chapter of medieval history? To understand the siege's final moments, we must confront its tragic climax, when Rouen's defenders could endure no more, and their last fragile hopes crumbled into despair and submission. By January 1419, Rouen's defenders reached their breaking point. After 6 horrific months of siege, starvation, and disease, the city's leaders reluctantly opened negotiations for surrender. The proud city that once vowed never to yield finally fell through sheer unrelenting misery. Henry's terms for surrender were harsh but calculated. Rouen was required to pay an enormous ransom, further crippling its exhausted population. The city's fortifications were dismantled to prevent future resistance, and all soldiers defending the city were forced into humiliating submission, stripped of their honor and dignity. For Rouen's civilians, surrender brought relief from starvation but also humiliation and bitterness. Families struggled to rebuild their shattered lives amidst destroyed homes, depleted resources, and broken communities. Many faced a grim future under English rule, with limited rights and constant fear of retribution. For Henry, Rouen's fall was a significant victory, strategically securing Normandy and bolstering his campaign to claim the French crown. Yet even in triumph, the siege had taken a severe toll on his own forces. Thousands of English soldiers had perished from disease, exhaustion, and harsh winter conditions, revealing the costly price of victory. The siege of Rouen also carried deeper consequences for both sides. For the French, it symbolized a catastrophic failure to defend their homeland, deeply wounding their national pride and fueling resentment against English occupation. Rouen's surrender became a rallying point for French resistance, galvanizing future opposition and resistance efforts. For England, the victory provided temporary dominance, yet the brutality of the siege haunted many involved. Soldiers returned home scarred physically and emotionally, while Henry's reputation as a ruthless conqueror spread across Europe, shaping perceptions of English military strategy for generations. Historically, the siege of Rouen became an infamous example of siege warfare's cruelty, demonstrating how total warfare could devastate entire populations, eroding the boundaries between combatants and civilians. The siege profoundly impacted medieval European warfare, influencing future military and moral boundaries. Ultimately, Rouen's tragic fall represented more than a military conquest. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of war. The memories of suffering, starvation, and desperation lingered long after the walls were rebuilt, shaping the identity and resilience of those who survived. But how did Rouen's brutal experience reshape the course of the 100 Years' War? What seeds of rebellion and resistance did it plant, leading to the eventual rise of new French heroes? To explore that, we must look ahead to the rise of one of history's most extraordinary figures, Joan of Arc. The siege of Rouen wasn't just a military victory. It was a chilling reminder of how far human beings could push each other in pursuit of power. Behind the tactical brilliance and strategic success lay an appalling human tragedy, a grim legacy of medieval warfare's darkest capabilities. Rouen's fall reshaped the 100 Years' War, changing the political landscape of medieval Europe. But its true legacy lies deeper in the resilience and determination of those who survived, rebuilt, and vowed never to forget. Their experiences became a powerful symbol of resistance against occupation and injustice. Yet from Rouen's ashes, new seeds of resistance were planted. The siege galvanized French opposition, setting the stage for one of history's most extraordinary figures, a young woman named Joan of Arc. Her rise would ignite hope, rally a nation, and dramatically reverse the fortunes of France in ways no one could have imagined. Join us next time as we explore the incredible story of Joan of Arc, a visionary heroine who defied every expectation and forever altered the course of history. Because sometimes, the darkest chapters lead to history's brightest moments. Subscribe and like this video. Part 8, The Rise of Joan of Arc, coming soon. This history replay this day